All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Definitely. Always up for a good deep dive.
Great. Well, today we're going to be taking a look at some pretty interesting picks that President-elect Trump has made for some key public health positions.
Ooh, this is going to be juicy.
It is. It is. Our main focus is going to be on Dr. Marty McCurry.
Okay.
He's the nominee to lead the FDA. But we've also got a couple other really interesting figures.
Right.
Dr. Dave Weldon for the CDC, and then, you might recognize her, Fox News contributor Jeanette Nishiwat for Surgeon General.
Wow, that's quite a lineup.
It is. So the source material suggests that these nominations could really shake things up in the U.S. healthcare system, especially because it seems like McCurry shares some common ground with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who,
Yeah.
as you know, is Trump's pick for HHS secretary.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they all work together.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, when you think about the FDA, it's not just some bureaucratic agency.
Right.
It's regulating something like 20% of U.S. consumer spending.
Wow. You're talking pharmaceuticals, food, cosmetics, the list goes on and on. So the potential ripple effect of these nominations, I mean, it's significant.
Yeah, you're not kidding. This is not like a minor reshuffling. We're talking power. We're talking potential disruption to some major industries.
Absolutely.
And Makari, you know, he's an interesting guy. Not exactly your typical pick for this kind of role.
Right. What do you mean?
Well, he's been a prominent voice, you know, on Fox News and other kind of conservative outlets. And he hasn't exactly been shy about expressing some contrarian viewpoints.
I've heard that,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to COVID.
Oh, yeah. Remember all that stuff about masking and the booster vaccinations for young children?
Oh, yeah, he was advocating for that herd immunity approach, wasn't
He
he?
was. He was.
Right.
Which has been pretty controversial, you know, especially when you contrast it with the CDC's data on vaccine effectiveness and preventing deaths. I mean, they estimate that vaccinations prevented something like over 18 million hospitalizations and 3 million deaths from COVID in 2020 and 2021. Yeah, it's definitely a hot button issue. And it seems like Makari isn't afraid to go against the grain, even when it comes to institutions like the CDC.
He isn't. And it's not just the COVID stuff. The source material also points to Makari's criticism of the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, especially with the whole opioid crisis.
Right. He really slammed them for, misleading data around OxyContin and other opioids. And his criticisms, they go even deeper than just the opioids.
What do you mean?
Well, he seems to think that the FDA has been prioritizing speed over thoroughness when it comes to drug approvals.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, he's basically saying that they're too influenced by, industry lobbying and the fees that they get from the drug makers.
Wait, so the drug companies actually pay the FDA to review their own products?
Apparently so.
Wow, I did not know that. That seems like a major conflict of interest.
It does, doesn't it? And this ties in directly to what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wants to do. He's actually proposing to completely eliminate those industry payments to the FDA.
Oh, wow, that's a pretty radical change. How would the FDA even operate without that funding?
Well, that's the thing. Kennedy Jr.'s plan would require billions in federal funding to replace that lost revenue.
So you could have a situation where Makari is pushing for stricter scrutiny of drug approvals, which could mean longer review times, potentially fewer approvals, and the FDA is grappling with a totally revamped funding model.
Exactly. This could get messy. I mean, talk about clashing priorities.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity to an already complex situation.
Absolutely. And this is just scratching the surface. We haven't even touched upon Kennedy Jr.'s other ideas, like banning drug ads on TV.
Wait, what? Banning drug ads?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's like uncharted territory, right? Wouldn't that face some serious legal challenges?
I would think so, especially with those First Amendment protections for free speech.
Yeah, the First Amendment protects commercial speech, which would include drug ads. It's not clear how Kennedy Jr.'s proposal would actually navigate those complexities, but it definitely shows that he's serious about tackling what he sees as undue influence from the pharmaceutical industry.
It really does. So let's recap. We've got Mekatari, who seems intent on shaking things up at the FDA with his focus on drug safety and maybe a slower approval process.
Right.
Then we've got Kennedy Jr., who wants to completely overhaul how the FDA is funded and maybe even restrict drug advertising.
Right. This is like a political thriller in the making, and
Right.
we're just getting started.
I know, it's wild, right? So what are your initial thoughts on all of this? What jumps out at you?
Well, I think what's most striking is just the potential for a major power shift in the healthcare sector. This is not just about policy tweaks. This is about like a fundamental rethinking of the relationship between the government, the pharmaceutical industry, and ultimately the American people.
It really is. And I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to unpack here. And I'm really eager to delve deeper into the potential ramifications of these nominations. What do you see, Dwight? Ready to keep going?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Right.
This is definitely a story worth watching closely.
It is. So we were just talking about, this potential clash between McCarry's focus on drug safety and Kennedy Jr.'s plans to, revamp how the FDA is funded.
Yeah.
It just seems like a recipe for some serious tension.
It really does. Imagine, Makari maybe slowing down drug approvals in the name of greater scrutiny, but he's also having to contend with a drastically different funding structure thanks to Kennedy Jr.'s proposal.
Right.
It's a paradox, aiming for stricter oversight, but maybe facing resource constraints at the same time.
And that funding piece is key, right? If drug companies are no longer footing the bill for their reviews directly, where does the money come from? Can Congress really be expected to just come up with billions of dollars to fill that void?
It's a really good question. And, it brings us to a much broader point. Regulating an industry as powerful and as complex as pharmaceuticals, it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
You've got patient safety on one hand and the need to foster innovation on the other. It's just not a simple equation.
And then you throw in, Kennedy Jr.'s idea of banning drug ads on TV.
Right.
It's like throwing a grenade into an already volatile situation.
It is a pretty radical proposal.
What's the reasoning behind it?
Well, the argument is that, these direct-to-consumer ads, they inflate healthcare costs, they lead to overprescribing of medications, and they could even pose risks to patients by promoting drugs that aren't suitable for them.
Okay, I can see where they're coming from.
Yeah.
We've all seen those ads with the rapid-fire list of side effects.
Exactly.
You're like, wait a minute, is the cure worse than the disease?
Exactly. And, those side effects can be significant. Critics argue these ads, they create a false sense of urgency, pushing people to pressure their doctors for medications they might not even need.
So is Kennedy Jr. basically saying that the FDA should have more control over how drug companies market their products to the public?
It seems so. He definitely seems concerned about Big Pharma's influence on both doctors and patients.
This is starting to sound like a much more hands-on approach to regulation.
Yeah.
We're talking everything from drug development to marketing to even how those drugs are prescribed.
Precisely. And if we connect this back to McCarry's likely focus on stricter drug approvals, it's easy to see a potential clash forming between the government and the pharmaceutical industry.
And that's where things get really interesting, right? Drug companies, they pour billions into research and development. If they start seeing the regulatory environment as hostile, wouldn't that just stifle innovation?
Right.
We could see fewer breakthroughs, fewer treatment options in the long run.
That is a valid concern. It highlights the complexity of this whole issue. How do you ensure patient safety and promote innovation while also holding a powerful industry accountable? And right now, with a new administration just coming in, it's impossible to predict how they'll navigate these challenges.
It's all unfolding in real time. We've got these larger-than-life figures with strong personalities and even stronger opinions. They're about to enter the pressure cooker of Washington politics. And the outcome, it could have significant consequences for the health and well-being of millions of Americans.
It is a high-stakes scenario, and the outcome is far from certain. We're essentially watching the opening moves of a complex game, and it's anyone's guess how it will play out.
Which makes it all the more important for people to, stay informed and engaged with these issues. This isn't just about abstract policy debates. It's about things that could have a direct impact on all of our lives.
Absolutely. We encourage all our listeners to continue, researching and thinking critically about these nominations and the potential changes they could bring.
I think that's great advice. We've covered a lot of ground today, but there's still much to consider.
Indeed. We've only just begun to explore the potential ramifications of these appointments and the broader questions they raise about the future of healthcare in America.
And speaking of the future, that's exactly where we're headed next. We'll be back after a moment to share some final thoughts and key takeaways for you to ponder. Okay, so we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into President-elect Trump's public health picks.
It's been quite a ride.
It has. We've covered a lot, potential clashes within the administration, concerns about drug safety versus, fostering innovation and the sheer influence of the FDA and big pharma.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It is. And I think it's time to bring it all home. We've talked big picture policy, but what could these nominations actually mean for everyday Americans?
That's the question, isn't it? It's impossible to predict the future with certainty.
Right.
But we can, look at McAdoo and Kennedy Jr.'s stated goals and speculate on some potential outcomes.
So let's start with Macri and his focus on stricter drug approvals. How might that affect the average person?
Well, if he follows through, we could see fewer new drugs coming to market,
Yeah.
or the longer approval process for those that do. This has a double-edged impact. On the one hand, it could mean better protection for patients from, potentially harmful medications. But on the other hand, it could also mean people with serious illnesses have to wait longer for potentially life-saving treatments.
Yeah, that's a tough trade-off to navigate.
Yeah.
Waiting for a new drug can feel like an eternity when you're dealing with a serious health issue.
It's true, and it raises questions about, who gets to decide what level of risk is acceptable. This is likely to be at the forefront of many debates and decisions in the coming years.
And what about Kennedy Jr.'s proposal to ban drug ads on TV? What would that look like for consumers?
If it actually happened, it would be a radical shift. No more celebrity endorsements or emotional appeals to sway viewers. Pharmaceutical companies would have to find entirely new ways to market their products.
Wow, that's a huge change. No more seeing those ads every commercial break.
Right.
But wouldn't that make it harder for people to stay informed about new treatment options?
Potentially. It would definitely put more responsibility on doctors to educate their patients about different medications and make informed recommendations. It could also mean a less informed public, relying more on their doctor's guidance rather than, seeking out information independently.
So it seems like every potential change brings both benefits and drawbacks. There's no easy fix.
Nope. And that's why it's so crucial to approach these topics with nuance, recognizing the complexity involved. There's no magic bullet when it comes to healthcare policy.
Well said.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who are trying to make sense of all this, what's the one thing you want them to take away from our conversation today?
I think the most important thing is to stay engaged. Pay attention. Do your own research. Form your own opinions. These issues affect all of us, and it's crucial to participate in informed and thoughtful discussions.
I couldn't agree more. This has been quite a deep dive into some potentially game-changing nominations, and it's clear that we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, there's always more to learn.
Always. The future of healthcare in America is at a crossroads, and it's up to all of us to engage in the conversation.
Well said.
So we hope you found this deep dive informative and thought-provoking.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those tough questions.